Hey, this is Mike Shank, and this is the At Speed podcast presented by Rocky Fork Company.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second edition of At Speed with Mike Shank and yours truly, Tim May. And as we speak now, Mike, by the way, welcome, Mike.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
As we speak now, you've got a race. Your race team has a race in the books, the 2020. Not exactly the finish you wanted, but you guys, as you said, y'all came, y'all saw, and y'all finished the Rolex 24-hour race at Daytona, a race you guys actually won back in 2012. But just right now, you feeling a bit of jet lag? I mean, what's the sense of being up all night and then some over the weekend?
No, I'm feeling pretty good today as we record this and look back on this past weekend. It was a good and bad all at the same time. And we can talk about this a little bit because I think some of the folks that are going to listen to this are going to want to know about it. But the process and everything we go to try to equalize all these great cars in our class is very complicated, and it's called balance of performance, BOP, and it's set by using parameters that IMSA, the sanctioning body, gets at the ROAR test that we had about 3 weeks ago, right after the new year at Daytona. So they take real performance data, they look at how fast our car is or has the potential to be, and then they equalize our horsepower and weight so that ideally, in our class, there's 18 cars. All 18 cars come across the finish line at the same time in a perfect world. Okay?
Yeah.
The problem with doing this is that the humans get involved. And we all know that they BOP us and we hold back sometimes and we don't show everything we have, and other teams do it worse than some. And so this time, IMSA got it wrong, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
They got our BOP, our power level, and our weight way off, and it rendered us gutless, Tim. We just had no guts to go down those straightaways. And in the Daytona, you're done.
Yeah.
Without that. So,
Mike, wait, let me interrupt you. You remember on the first episode of this where I was like casting aspersions at such things because, I think if you work hard to get to basically grease up a race car where it's fast, it's I don't like it when the sanctioning bodies step in and try to equalize things to that. I mean, I believe in giving you a set of parameters and now go build your go-kart. You know what I mean? And
that's how it was back in the old analog days.
Yeah.
Like Tim, where you're from.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
And the problem with that, I tend to agree actually, but the problem is that there are the haves and have-nots, and there always will be in racing.
True.
This system of BOP and having more spec-type racing cars makes it a little more feasible for more people to be competitive, and that can be the case. That can actually be true. Okay. As an example, we won overall with our little team in 2012. We beat a lot of bigger efforts because the rules were so tight it allowed us to perform.
Yes.
Okay. And that's cool. That's cool. I can sign up for that.
Yes.
The problem is now, all of us, they're not getting great information to judge these cars' power. Now, whether you're talking R class or prototype or GTLM like Ray Hall's in, they're not getting the greatest data to do this. They're analyzing tools, get tricked, and unfortunately, sometimes you got to pay the price. Now, typically, it gets corrected, Tim. I would agree with you. In whole, if we could just have a set of rules, car is this dimension and this weight, and this is how big the motor can be, you just go for it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And it's just not that simple, unfortunately.
Yeah,
anymore.
but here's what I get to with you. I don't want to get into a big brouhaha here about it, but I mean, you left there feeling maybe somebody didn't rob you, but you kind of got your pocket picked a little bit. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but I was watching that race.
No, you're 100% right.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah. And nobody likes to get their pocket picked. With that said, I mean, you guys had some troubles too. I mean, some problems you overcame in that race. I mean, I wrote down a few notes as the thing went along. I'm like one of those idiots that stays up almost all night watching that thing, and
we need idiots like that.
Yeah. But I mean, like a couple of things I wrote down. 3:00 in the morning, the 86 or so had to go in and get what y'all had to repair the splitter or replace a splitter on the car in the garage for an extended period. Correct? I mean, just what's that like in the middle of the night to pull off something like that?
It's not a lot of fun, Tim. I got to tell you that was caused by a driver going over the apex too much
There
and
you go.
dropping a wheel on the backside of an apex curb.
There you go.
And it just slammed the splitter and broke it. This is one of those mistakes you can't have at the Rolex. You're not going to win the race.
Correct.
So, and when we talk till we're blue in the face about this, but sometimes, stuff happens.
Yeah. And then you had, a problem with, not a problem, maybe not be the right word, but with Parenti, he started cramping. I think, he was in the 57 car, right? I mean, he was going to be, I think, probably the guy who finished the race, but you end up going with A.J. Allmendinger for a double stint there at the end and stuff. And not that you lose anything with A.J. Allmendinger in the car, but those are the things that crop up in a 24-hour race, right?
Yeah. Alvaro Parent, you're talking about, Portuguese guy that drives for me this year, all year, by the way. He is a badass.
Yeah.
He is one of the best, I promise you.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we just didn't quite get the seat right for him. And after a stint, he started cramping just horribly. He couldn't function. And that's a little bit on us, a little bit on him. But yeah, AJ probably had his best race to date in the NSX for us was this year. He really did a great job. It's really tough when you're beat. I mean, these drivers, all 8 of them, they knew there's nothing that they can do. It's tough to keep the drive, right?
Yeah, yes.
And we kept encouraging him because all kinds of stuff can happen in this race, right?
Right.
And, what's funny, Tim, is that we were able to strategize and keep our cars kind of up in the mix for a very long time. We just couldn't hold it up there. We had good strategy, really good pit stops, and we kind of get elevated back up in the top 5, and then we just couldn't hold on to it. So It can be excruciatingly painful, right?
Yes.
That's part of what we hear.
I think some of the cramping could have been from pushing the gas pedal as hard as you could, knowing you weren't going to get any more. You know what I mean? And
you got that right.
I mean, that's crazy, because I forgot who the car was that was trying to. It was in one of the other classes where I was watching. They had one of the fellows on television, and they were trying to drive the car hard into the corners because they weren't getting the performance, coming out. And I mean, you know what I mean, trying to drive it as deep as they could. And of course, you're just pressing on that brake as hard as you can, and just all kinds of things just crop up. Well, Mike, I mean, just in a nutshell, like I was going to bring that up to you. How do you keep the dauber up, the spirits up when it's obvious, was probably obvious from the first stint how much you guys had been robbed of performance? How hard was it to kind of keep the dauber up over the 24 hours with your guys?
It's really tough. Like I said, I knew where we were within the first hour, no question about it.
Yes.
And it's hard to watch that. So we just focus on just doing the best possible race execution-wise that we can. And honestly, we had a problem. We one of the cars, the 86 car, fell off the track and broke the splitter. When we come back to this race, I build a thing called a Bible, right?
Yes.
And I can't tell you, if these guys would just listen to us, the Bible has in it everything that can go wrong and has go wrong. And, we have a chance at doing really well if you pay attention to this Bible. But sometimes in the heat of battle, heat of competition, you get mad at somebody puts a fender on you. Just lots of audibles have to be called,
Yes.
And, this particular problem on the splitter will be in the Bible next year to remember that, hey, listen, you go behind a curb, you're going to get whacked. You're going to take us out of the race.
Yeah, yeah. How did that driver explain himself?
Well, there is no explanation. There really isn't. I didn't realize I got in there that deep, or I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah,
to be honest, at this point.
But the bottom line is it's a 24-hour race. What are you talking about? Hey,
what are we doing here? Well, we got to push hard and we got to make really, really good decisions.
Yes, yeah.
And we have not only us on the pit box, but we have 2 full-time spotters on each car to help them manage all of the traffic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So,
well, we saw what happened with Elio Castroneves, and I can't remember the guy that took him out. I thought there was blame there on both of those guys in the LMP in the prototypes. Early in that race, talking about what are you doing? This early in the race, but it was clear also that Elliott was kind of blocking that early in the race, even though trying to keep that guy behind him to a certain extent. So what do you do? That's why that's what sets this apart. What makes it an actual competition or a race is that you have human elements involved who sometimes do stupid stuff, right? Well,
yeah, let's look at that. Let's dive into that particular incident. you got Helio, who I drove for me in 2007, and I love him to death. I think he's a great guy, but man, is he hard to pass. Very frustrating to race against, right?
Yes.
And so, the Mazda was really quick in a straight line. The Mazda had a big run on him, and he didn't want to give that run up on that lap, and he should have.
Yeah.
He honestly should have.
Yeah.
That car was fast enough to pass Helio straight up anyways, right?
Yes.
He pushed the subject, and you can't push Helio. He'll take you out, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, you learn these lessons. I guarantee you the next time they get on track together, they're going to have to think about it.
And
right?
not only that, but down the end of that straightaway, the ladies and gentlemen, you know what we're talking about. If you watch this race, I mean, he should have sensed him or seen him in his mirror trying to make that move, and Helio just kind of took the turn like he was the only car on the track, and so that's what happens. I mean, I think there was blame on both sides there when you really get right down to it. Hey, real quick, across town, those guys are still headquartered in Hilliard, at least for now. The BMW GTLM team with Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, they won their second straight GTLM category. I think you were probably impressed by that, and just what was your take on that?
I just thought it was really well executed. I think their team and their drivers just in that particular car made really good decisions, were extremely competent, had very little issues that I could see. Now maybe there was a little bit that I didn't, and finished the deal just like they should have,
Yeah.
And they deserved to win, and it was a big effort for them in that car. And I know, lots of people over there working on that project. I mean, it's a big deal for BMW,
Oh, absolutely.
And it's pretty cool that those guys deserve that. No question about it.
What's funny is as you watch that race going into the last hour and a half or so, just on that category, the Porsche couldn't keep up with them on the straightaway, but was seemed to be handling better in the twisty part, and yet in the last hour and a half, it looked like the Porsche found something and turned it up on the straightaway, but it looked like the BMWs did the same thing. I don't know if you weren't able to probably watch it like I was, but it was kind of interesting, a tit for tat kind of situation.
Guarantee you, they always save a little bit for later, right?
Yeah.
We spend way too much time. That everything you just said is dealing with BOP. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So they dial it up when they need it, and only when they need it, and that's an unfortunate thing, but that's just the way it is. So you're probably not wrong.
Yeah. Hey, you can't spell BOPped, BOPPED, without BOP. You know that, right?
That's it. Got that right. Yeah.
You guys got bopped. I mean, that's the bottom line of that. And, I didn't know if you wanted to even touch on that as it started, but you went right into it, and anybody could see that. I mean, as well as you guys tested at the Roar, and then to come back and just basically, I was going to use a bad term there that they do to pets, to male dogs, after they get a certain age, but that's kind of what happened to y'all. So too bad about that. Too bad about that, Mike. But flipping, in which you have to do, you have to keep these things in your mind all the time, but now you can flip a little bit more, 90%, I think, or more to your IndyCar effort in the first, this is going to be your first season. We talked about in the first episode, your first full season, your team in a full season IndyCar effort. And really, that begins on the track February 11th down at the Circuit of the Americas, as they called COTA, down outside of Austin, Texas, with a preseason test. And I'm just wondering, I mean, are y'all burning the midnight oil to get ready for that, or were you born ready for this opening test?
We've been working on it real hard. I've got 10 guys here working full time on the IndyCar program, and it actually starts tomorrow for Jack Harvey. Jack will be in the Honda simulator in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And he'll start with the engineers in the simulator, which is great, and get ahead of it and get warmed up, and they'll start working together, which is always a vital key to any kind of racing, the relationship between a driver and an engineer. That starts tomorrow. The trucks will load in a week or so from when we're recording this, and we'll be off for our first open test. And there's a lot to happen, a lot to go through when we're down there on these first 2 days. Once we get rolling with this IndyCar project, it goes fast. We have lots of running opportunities, and I got to tell you, we started this new technical relationship, we'll call it, with Andretti this year, and it's been going great. I got a guy named Andy Listis, who is my new what we call race engineer. So he's the lead engineer on our project. He works for Andretti, but is contracted to me for the year. And he is awesome. He's going to be great. He deserves this opportunity just like Jack does. And, I'm going to be really curious. I'm going to be really curious to see how this transition goes and what kind of speed we have and kind of where we fall in the queue here at St. Pete coming up in a month and a half or so.
What have you noticed? What have you noticed immediately the difference between this and your Schmidt relationship that you think is going to pay dividends? Obviously, it's a deeper, bigger computer that has a lot of data from success, big time success in it. As you and I talked about on the first podcast. I'm talking about the Andretti computer, so to speak. But what else have you noticed that'll make a difference? Do you think, Mike, right off the bat?
Well, they emphasize different things. Okay, and by and large, you'd have to say Andretti had a better run in IndyCar than Schmidt, although Schmidt has had success for sure.
Yes.
Without getting down in the dirt too much, because I'm not allowed to talk about a lot, but there are differences in what we call the car builds. So how the cars are assembled, how we build uprights, how we build axles for drag reduction, how we fit bodywork, how we align things, and the shock absorbers are all different team to team, right?
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about our position is we kind of get to see a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
We're bound by confidentiality that we can't talk about what we see, but it's kind of a cool position if you ask me. And I also think that it's kind of a new modern model if you want to get into IndyCar racing, right?
Yes.
Take the days back when Tasman and those guys Ray Hall were active here in IndyCar, man. They did everything in-house, right? And it cost a fortune.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So this way of doing things gives us the benefit of having deep technology and deep engineering, and we pay for a percentage of it. It's almost like leasing a car instead of buying it. You know?
Yeah. So
we give it back. We give it back when we're done.
So when you guys go to Texas, we take people who don't understand a test session, what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, don't you want to be the fastest car there? You understand what I'm saying? And yet, that's not the focus. But even it's kind of like reminds me of when you used to practice, with any kind of sports. You kind of want to prove you're the big dog on the field at the end of the day, whether you're practicing or playing a game. But just how disciplined do you have to be at a test? If you follow my drift, to follow I would think you probably already have a checklist of things you want to go through, et cetera. Explain to people how you approach a test from that standpoint.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I like it. But the other question on top of that is especially this first time out for this group. Okay. So
Yes.
The way we approach this now, you got to remember, we got a brand new car we built here. We need to run it in. So we need to make sure all the electronics are working, and there's always something that doesn't work quite right. So we'll spend, call it the first 2 hours just dealing with gremlins typically. Okay.
Yes.
And then we got a bed in parts. We call bed in process, which you take brand new parts and you get some time and heat and energy in them. Then you got to do that. But by the answer is this, by the time of the end of the second day, you want to be first for a few reasons. You take that's called momentum, like in any sport, any stick and ball sport, you get momentum. Same in racing. You want to leave that track with your chest out in the top five, knowing that, hey, listen, in this group we got here today, I can compete for wins, right?
Yes.
And we're certainly going to be trying to do that. So there's tactics involved in that. We only get so many sets of tires for this test. And COTA is what we call a high degradation track, meaning the tires stay good for 2 laps, and then your lap time starts sliding away. And so you got to plan this whole thing out. And a lot of it, honestly, is just a psychology exercise for the driver and the engineers.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to leave there feeling good. I mean, boss, basically, right? I mean, how much of a luxury, because I'm not sure you've had this luxury the first couple of years in IndyCar to be able to take part in, I mean, I know you've tested a little bit, right? But how much of a luxury is it to be one of the big boys now? I mean, I would think you can already see the dividends that'll be coming, even if you were running as an independent. But how much of a luxury is it to get this kind of track time?
How much of a luxury to get more track time? Is that what you said?
To get more track time. I mean, because that's where you find out.
Yeah, Yeah, well, listen, I mean, we're just truly lucky to be able to have what I would call comparable testing budgets to most other teams. Listen, we don't have Rogers' budget, right? But we have very similar equipment, and we've got a talented driver and a talented crew. That gives us opportunity then, right? And now, knowing that we got it the whole year, we can settle in, right?
Yes.
And really not worry that we're gonna lose our job or we're gonna lose our ride. We're committed. We have contracts, right? And we can work for something. And honestly, when the boys come to me and say, "Hey, we need to spend $15,000 on a new whiz bang part," I know I can spread that out over a couple of years too on the other side, on the business side, right?
Yes.
I want to give Jack and the engineers everything we can, every trick in the book that we think is beneficial.
Hey, we talked about this a little bit on the first podcast, but I want to bring it up again. I don't know if the word is jacked are you? Well, what word would you use to describe your excitement for what's coming or your eagerness?
Yeah, I mean, jacked is pretty good for multiple reasons. But I think listen, Tim. When we did all the races through Indy 500 last year, and when we left, and that was my plan, we were 10th in points. And that's exactly where I thought we deserved to be.
Yes.
I wasn't too happy. I wasn't too sad. We'd shown some brilliance at different times, and that's what I'd hoped for. Now we need to push that model, right? We need to try to finish in the top 6 or 7 in the championship, and that's what we're angling to do. I'd like to see us, finish in the top 5 times. That's my goal. I'd like us to transfer to the Fast 6 at least 3 or 4 times on the road courses. I think that would be great. And then we need to constantly focus on finishing 10th or better. And that will net a very tidy year for us.
Yeah. Hey, when you guys, like we talked about this a little bit, you and I did over the years, but when you guys came back last year at Mid-Ohio after being off for a while, could you see, I'm trying to think if that was your first race back from after yeah, but could you see where the field had advanced? You understand what I'm saying? From where you last left it. Do you follow my drift there? Meaning the field, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I said that privately to my guys. I'm like, man, it's not only just Jack, by the way, it's the crew guys.
Right.
You can see the rust just falling off on the pit stops, right? And the other teams, they've been banging it out all summer, right? And it's a true difference. Not that we didn't overcome it or that we showed horrible, but it's just, we finished 10th in that race, Tim, if you remember.
I do.
But in the year before that, we finished 19th, a lap down. So we made a big gain, okay?
Yeah.
But still, you got to shake that rust off, and there's a lot to that. When you're out here, doing it every race or every other weekend during the summer, it matters, and it really shows.
Did you and Jack have, I don't know, did y'all have a meeting of the minds, Jack Harvey, did y'all have a meeting of the minds, or did y'all discuss things? What set him on the course of slim and trim is the way to go? Because how much weight did he lose? I'm trying to remember, because we talked about this at Indy last year a little bit, but it was a good 15 or 20 pounds. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but go ahead.
Oh, shit, it was 25 or 27 actually now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's enough. I've told him he can stop anytime he wants. I think a lot of it, in IndyCar, they weigh the car without the driver, right? So, if you're Graham, you're 205. He's the heaviest driver, right?
Yes.
And he's spotting he's spotting Jack 40 pounds.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
That's too much. And this we're fighting for half pounds and pounds to get off the car. That's one thing specifically, right?
Yes.
So from a performance standpoint, it's a good thing. From a dedication and showing, hey, I have the desire to show the world that I can drive race cars at a high level, and if this helps me do that, I'm here to do it. And there's a finite amount of time a guy can be really good at racing automobiles, and Jack's in the middle of it right now, and he needs to step up and do it, and he did. And it just shows a lot to every single person on the team.
I'm trying to remember. Did he have access to the Honda simulator last year? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah. He's been on and off. It's part of our contract with Honda when we do our motor release. We get some time there, and he's been on. He's really good on the simulator. Some drivers hate the simulator, Tim. Some get sick.
Yeah,
some don't think
weird.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
But, we take everything we can get. And and my driver likes doing it, and I encourage him to get over there and do it. So tomorrow, they will run all day in the simulator. They'll break for lunch a little bit, and they hop right back in it. It's now we're not talking about like an old Atari simulator system here, right? We're talking about a $10 million simulator, more on the lines of a jet fighter deal,
Yeah. But have you ever been in it? I mean, what do you think is the greatest benefit? That it keeps the driver sharp from the standpoint of breaking points of what do you think? What's the greatest benefit you think from it, Mike?
Well, sharpness is one thing, but it's not the greatest. Okay, the greatest thing is that the engineer and the driver start working on things, change on the car to make it better in the simulator. Theoretically, that would work on the street too, or on the track too. Okay.
Yeah.
So when they roll into St. Petersburg, they'll say, "Hey, I remember we took some spring out of the front, and it got better when we turned in." They'll be able to compare it to the simulator and see if they correlate. Okay.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing. So it's that relationship, since it's early on with the engineer, that he'll start building in the simulator, right? In the simulator. Remember, when they do a drive file, they call it drive file for each track. They include all the bumps in that track.
Yeah.
So it's and the signage and the turn-in the brake markers and all the visual things are there. So they can go back and say, hey, on the sim, we had a different steering rack ratio, and it was better when we turned, all kinds of stuff.
Hey, do you have to provide, I'm all curious about stuff like this, but do y'all have to provide them with the initial setup? Can they dial that into the simulator so that it's like you're getting into your car, or do you kind of start from a default, setting for the car, and then how does that work, Mike, in a nutshell?
Well, all teams have a kind of a race file for their cars.
Gotcha.
So Andretti has it, and we'll start there, okay? And then, then we can try other things based off of that. That's kind of what we call the base setup, okay?
Yes.
And they can always reference back to it if they get lost or feel like they don't know where they're at. They can always go back to that. And by the way, it's just computer. It's just a keyboard. You don't have to physically do anything except punch a key, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I like to have one of those in my basement, my man. See if you can work it out for me.
Oh,
Mike.
man, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Hey, let's wrap this up. But just I want to ask you, get back to one thing. So when you leave Daytona, did you voice your displeasure with the BOP? I mean, did you voice that to officials, or how does that work moving down the line, so to speak?
I voiced my displeasure from hour 2 to hour 24 to anybody that would listen, and that mostly by text, but some by mouth.
Yeah.
And you just have to. You have to get your point across that you've been wronged, and the people need to understand that. And it's not over, by the way. We're still working on it after the fact.
I'm sure. So. Was there anything they could have done during the race that could have helped you? You understand what I'm saying? Or is it once your car is set, it's set?
It's set. There's nothing they can do at the race. Once in a while, they'll do something before the race, but very, very rarely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once it's kind of set after, the big, what we call the roar test, the beginning of January, you're kind of locked in for the most part. And we got locked in wrong. And it's just a shame because I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of dollars we spent in the month of January preparing and racing at Daytona to NSXs, okay?
Yeah.
And not only to give up good – now, by the way, we got decent points, and we're not out of anything, right? We're fine. But the point is that we had the potential for much, much better results.
Yeah.
And something totally out of our control took that out of our hands, and it's not right. It's not fair. And by the way, it happens to other people too sometimes too.
Oh, sure,
right? There's
sure.
2 other manufacturers that had a tough go too, besides us.
Well, that's been my big pet peeve about, I told you that when we were talking before we started our first podcast. I've never liked that, trying to equate cars, because eventually you do end up doing to somebody like they did to you. And, I remember back in the old days, when they took that 962, the Porsche 962, that, me and Will Crawl and a couple of guys, we could have gotten money together and bought a car and gone racing, right? But they kept penalizing it and penalizing it and penalizing it until all of a sudden now the Nissan is the hottest car, and it kind of made a guy like me who could go buy a car and compete not interested, because what am I going to get? I'm going to get a car that can't finish better than second, third place. So that's what bothers me. But I think once you show what you've got at the Roar, you've worked your butt off all winter to get that piece of equipment, and then it's kind of like going through customs at the airport, and they go through your suitcase and they take out your best pair of shoes and they say, "Okay, move on." You're still going to a formal dinner, but you're not with your best pair of shoes. As George Goebel said, you ever feel like life is a tuxedo and you're a pair of brown shoes? That's I imagine you kind of felt like that in the middle of that race. But hey,
that's it.
Mike, it's always a pleasure, my man. And the next time the folks see us, we're going to be talking about what went on at COTA. I'm expecting your team, and I'm not just saying it because we're on this podcast sponsored by Rocky Fork Company. I'm not just saying this because of that. I mean, I think your team has shown the ability to run fairly quick, to run with the big dogs, even on a limited scale the last couple of years. And I would think, like you said, the association with Andretti, the Andretti Autosport team, is only going to enhance that. And I think you feel the same kind of excitement, right?
Absolutely. I'm so excited about to see where we land here. And there'll be some tough times too, I'm sure. But
sure.
I really look forward to it. I'm glad to talk to you again, Tim. We'll talk about it soon.
You got it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll talk with Mike Shank on the At Speed podcast with Mike Shank and Tim May, and we'll get his take on what went on at the Circuit of the Americas, COTA, as you well know it, outside Austin, Texas, the first big test, the first big get-together of the full-time IndyCar teams. But until then, this is Tim May for At Speed with Mike Shank and Tim May. See you next time.